Hey guys, tonight we're drifting off to the vast Mongolian steppe, where the horizon stretches like a never-ending roll of felt and the air smells like frost and wild onions. You're waking up in a round, wool-lined tent, with your breath visible in the pre-dawn chill. Outside, a mare stamps her hoof impatiently, waiting to be milked. And let's be honest, you probably wouldn't last a day here without accidentally insulting a herdsman by mishandling his prized cheese knife. Yes, that was a capital offense in some clans. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere far-flung, drop a comment with your location and local time. Right now, it's just past 4 a.m. on the steppe, and the stars are fading as the sky pales to the color of watered-down airag, that fizzy fermented mare's milk will be guzzling later. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shiver as you push aside the gare's heavy felt door. The grass crunches underfoot, brittle with morning frost. A herdsman nods at you, already at work, his hands moving rhythmically against a mare's udder, steam rising from the milk pail. This isn't some idyllic scene from a pastoral poem, it's survival. Every squirt of milk is calories, currency, and sometimes even glue for repairing saddle straps. Historians still argue whether the Mongols' legendary stamina came from their horsemanship or their lactose-heavy diet. Either way, you're about to learn why cheese was the real MVP of the empire. Here's a mainstream fact to chew on. Mongol warriors could ride for days with just a handful of sun-dried cheese curds and some melted snow. But here's the quirky twist. They stored those curds in their hats. Body heat kept them pliable, and let's be real, it's the ultimate snack hack when your hands are busy holding reins or knocking arrows. The mare's milk hits the wooden pail with a rhythmic ping-ping-ping that blends with the distant jingle of sheep bells. You're handed a leather pouch of airag, the nomad's breakfast of champions, and take a hesitant sip. It's tart, fizzy, and vaguely reminiscent of that kombucha you left unfinished in your fridge back home. But here, there's no tossing it out when the flavor's off. Waste a drop, and you'll spend the next week hearing about the 1279 Great Milk Drought, when an entire clan allegedly survived on melted snow and a single wheel of aged yak cheese. As you mount your horse, with significantly less grace than the 5-year-old next to you, you notice the saddlebags aren't stuffed with weapons or treasure, but lumps of cheese wrapped in damp cloth. This is the Mongol secret weapon. Food that actually improves with every mile of jostling. The bumpier the ride, the better the churn, like a stone-age sous vide, if the machine was a grumpy pony named Borte. Historians still argue whether the Mongols' infamous speed came from their light cavalry tactics or the fact that no one stopped to set up a cheese board. But here's a fringe tidbit. Some clans buried their cheese in sheep bladders during migrations, creating an accidental, aged variety that could knock out a wolf with its aroma. By midday, the horizon shimmers like a mirage, and your saddlebag cheese has transformed. The morning's fresh curds, now warmed by the sun and kneaded by your horse's gait, have morphed into a stretchy, salty snack, the original string cheese. A passing herder tears off a piece with his teeth and offers it to you with a grin that says, "Go on, city slicker." It's chewy, faintly smoky, and inexplicably buttery despite zero refrigeration. This is the cheese that built an empire. While Europeans were fussing over moldy caves, Mongols had mastered dairy alchemy on horseback. The key? Mare's milk, which has more sugar and less fat than cow's milk, meaning it ferments faster into that beloved airag, or, if you wait too long, something strong enough to clean saddle leather. Here's a mainstream fact. Genghis Khan's armies traveled with kushushur, fried dumplings stuffed with cheese, as emergency rations. But the quirky twist? Archaeologists recently found 14th century cheese residue inside a deal, Mongol robe, sleeve. Scholars are divided. Was this a snack stash, or the world's first recorded case of "I forgot laundry day"? The herd halts at a shallow river, and the children immediately start fishing out lumps of cheese that had been steeping in the water like dairy tea bags. This is airwool, the ultimate travel snack, cheese so dehydrated it could survive a sandstorm. You're handed a piece that looks like fossilized coral and told it's good for stamina. Biting down, you realize this is what energy bars aspire to be: concentrated, slightly funky, and capable of lasting until the next solar eclipse. As you gnaw, slowly, unless you fancy dental work, the herders explain how summer's surplus milk becomes winter's lifeline. Every family had their own drying method. Some stretched curds on rooftops, others hung them in saddlebags like wind chimes. Historians still argue whether the zigzag patterns pressed into airwool were clan signatures or just bored shepherds playing with their food. But here's the fringe detail: on especially cold nights, nomads would soften airwool by tucking it into their hats while they slept. Forget hot water bottles, this was personal cheese warming, and frankly, we've lost something beautiful. As the sun dips, the campfire reveals dairy's dark side. A grizzled elder recounts the legend of the drunk goat, a cautionary tale about a herder who left fermented milk in a sheepskin sack too long, only for his favorite goat to sneak a lick, stumble into a wolf den, and somehow broker peace between the species in its bleary state. The moral? Always share your airag, or the spirits will. You're now sampling biaslag, a fresh cheese that's crumbly like feta but made with yak milk for extra richness. It's served on a slab of bark because, as the herder points out, dishes are heavy. This is the Mongols' real innovation: minimalism. Why bother with cellars when you've got permafrost? Why churn butter when galloping does it for you? Mainstream history credits them with the postal system and religious tolerance, but let's be real. Inventing cheese that thrives on horseback deserves equal billing. Though historians still argue whether Kublai Khan's famous "white foods only" rule applied to cheese, and if so, how angry he got when it yellowed with age. Night falls, and the stars look close enough to skim off with a cheese knife. Someone produces a kokur, a two-stringed fiddle, and starts playing a melody about a lovesick camel. The cheese course? Izgi, a creamy spread made by fermenting milk in a smoked sheep stomach. It's served with a twig for scooping, because again, dishes are for people who stay in one place. As you lick the last smoky traces off your makeshift utensil, you learn the true purpose of all that dairy fat: insulation. Nomads slathered Izgi on their faces in winter like edible chapstick. Pro tip: don't do this with modern supermarket ricotta. Historians still argue whether Marco Polo's accounts of milk wine were exaggerated, but here's a fringe fact: Mongols believed cheese could absorb bad dreams if placed under the pillow. If you woke up to find it had melted, well, let's just say you'd be skipping the airag that morning. Dawn finds you squinting at a breakfast that's 80% cheese by volume. There's airwool in your tea, it's stirring, crumbled biaslag on your flatbread, and a suspiciously wobbly dollop of something called sagaani day, white food for the soul. You eat it because refusing would be like declining a hug from a grandmother who wrestles yaks for fun. The herders pack up camp with practiced chaos, and you notice the children stuffing their pockets with cheese like it's candy. Because here, it is. A girl offers you a piece shaped like a tiny horse, a treat made from the season's first milk, believed to carry blessings. You half expect it to neigh. Historians still argue whether Mongols used cheese as mortar in emergency yurt repairs. The lactose would have acted as a weak adhesive, but let's be real, they probably just ate the supplies. The landscape shifts to rolling hills, and the conversation turns to cheese-related crimes. A herder recounts the infamous Great Yogurt Theft of 1223, when a rival clan stole a vat of fermenting milk, only to return it days later with a sheep as apology. The yogurt had turned into something fit only for polishing boots. Justice. You're now sampling shimmy and arki, a cheese distilled into liquor that tastes like someone set a barn on fire and bottled the fumes. It's served in a hollowed-out horn because, of course it is. One sip, and you understand why diplomats wrote home about Mongol hospitality being terrifyingly generous. Mainstream history focuses on their military tactics, but the real Mongol power move was serving guests cheese so potent it made them agree to anything. As the moon rises, an elder shows you how to read fortunes in spilled airag. The bubbles clinging to your cup's rim predict a long journey, shocking, and a gift of white food. Someone murmurs about the phantom herd, ghost mares whose milk never sours, visible only to those who've lost their way. You fall asleep to the sound of cheese drying on a rooftop, the stars wheeling overhead like a celestial dairy herd. Historians still argue whether Mongols really believed cheese contained spirits, or if that was just a handy excuse for midnight snacking. You wake to the sound of sheep bleating and the plink-plink of milk hitting a bronze pail. A child no older than 6 is milking a ewe with the focus of a concert pianist, her tiny hands moving in practiced rhythm. No stools, no machines, just a crouch perfected over generations. Mongol kids mastered dairy work before they could ride, because in a land where fast food meant grabbing cheese from your saddlebag while galloping, survival was a team sport. The morning's yield is poured into a sheep's stomach hung between 2 poles, nature's slow cooker. By noon, the sun will have transformed it into orum, a clotted cream so rich it makes butter look like diet food. You're warned not to touch it yet, disturbing the process invites bad luck, or worse, grandmother's disapproval. Historians still argue whether the Mongols' famed no dishes policy was pragmatism or performance art. But here's a fringe fact. Some clans used fresh cheese as temporary glue for repairing cracked leather, a snack and a tool kit that a blizzard rolls in unexpectedly, reducing visibility to angry sheep distance. The herders barely blink. This is when winter cheese shines. Someone produces a brick of Bortz, cheese so dehydrated it could dent a skull. You're instructed to suck on it like candy while waiting out the storm. As your teeth throb, you realize this is the original survival gear, food that doubles as a weapon and never spoils. The storm's howling winds remind you of the legend of the wind horse, a spirit said to ride gales while scattering cheese curds for lost travelers. Scholars debate if this was poetic metaphor or actual trail markers. Archaeologists have found ancient curds placed at regular intervals along migration routes. Mainstream history credits Mongol logistics for their conquests, but let's be real. An army that carries cheese requiring a hammer to serve was clearly unstoppable. The blizzard passes, revealing a landscape dusted in sugar-fine snow. A herder digs into the frozen ground near a riverbank and unearths a sheepskin bundle, last autumn's curd, cheese preserved in permafrost like a dairy time capsule. The frozen chunks are shaved into a pot of boiling water, creating instant cheese soup. It's salty, gamey, and inexplicably buttery despite months underground. This is the nomad's freezer aisle, the earth itself. While medieval Europeans built cellars, Mongols just stabbed a hole wherever the ground was firm and let winter do the rest. Historians still argue whether they borrowed this technique from Siberian reindeer herders or vice versa. But here's the quirky twist. Some burial sites contain cheese wrapped in written prayers, early attempts at blessed aging, or just the ultimate do not eat label. A trading party arrives, their saddlebags jingling with porcelain and spices. The real currency, though, is the arrowol they've carried from distant mountains, its flavor subtly different from local batches, like terroir for cheese nerds. You witness the world's most intense dairy tasting session as elders debate whose region produces the correct level of sourness. One trader reveals his secret. He aged his cheese in a bear's skull for boldness. It works, if bold means tastes like a forest fire in your mouth. This is the Silk Road's forgotten exchange, not just silks and ideas, but microbial cultures hitchhiking on curds. Historians still argue whether Marco Polo's description of black cheese referred to mold or actual charcoal-infused batches. Either way, you're relieved this sample isn't it. Evening brings storytelling around the fire, and tonight's tale features a lactose-intolerant wolf. According to legend, the beast kept raiding herds until a clever girl fed it shimmy and arki, that cheese liquor from Section 8. The wolf got so drunk it swore off dairy forever and became a guardian spirit. You side-eye the actual dogs lounging nearby, their coats suspiciously shiny, proof that modern wolves are still missing out. The conversation turns to cheese-related superstitions. Dropping arrowol means guests are coming, or you're clumsy. Sharing cheese during a waning moon causes arguments. Blame the tides, not your stinginess. Dreaming of melted cheese predicts rain, or a very creative subconscious. Historians still argue whether these beliefs were widespread or just one grandmother's way of getting kids to behave. You're woken before dawn for the best milk, collected when mares are calmest, their breath steaming in the icy air. The process is eerily silent, even the foals know not to interrupt. This milk becomes tsagaani day, the white food reserved for rituals and honored guests. It's served to you in a silver bowl that's probably older than your hometown. As you sip, the elder explains how dairy defined social bonds. Newborns were given a drop of mare's milk before colostrum. Brides carried cheese wheels to their new families as goodwill gestures. Warriors left curds at Ova shrines for protection. Mainstream history focuses on battles, but the real Mongol soft power was making everyone owe them dairy favors. A commotion erupts when someone discovers a half-eaten cheese stash, the work of a Kar Soul, the mythical black thief, who's either a mischievous spirit or just that one cousin nobody confronts. The solution? A ritual involving sprinkling airag around the gur while chanting, which either wards off evil or guilt-trips the culprit into confessing. You're now trying kailmag, a clotted cream caramelized over dung-fueled flames. It's like creme brulee, if the torch was a desert wind and the ramekin was a scrap of felt. Historians still argue whether Mongols invented this or adapted it from Uyghur traders, but everyone agrees it's the reason nomads never needed dentists. This stuff could seal cracks in yurts, the herd reaches summer pastures, and suddenly, cheese production kicks into overdrive. Women set up dairy camps where every surface holds something fermenting, drying, or dripping. It's like a mad scientist's lab. If the science was, how many ways can we preserve milk before it spoils? You're put to work stirring a vat of airag, yogurt, with a paddle that's definitely also used for herding stubborn goats. The rhythm is hypnotic, 3 clockwise, 2 counter, a recipe passed down through generations who never wrote it down because who forgets how to stir? Historians still argue whether the Mongols' dairy surplus enabled their conquests or was just a happy side effect of having too many horses. A surprise guest arrives, a batar, hunter, with an eagle on his wrist and a pouch of rare kailmag made from Argali sheep milk. This is the dairy equivalent of single-origin champagne. The method? Follow wild sheep to high cliffs, milk them at dawn, and don't fall to your death. Worth it? The creamy, herbaceous flavor says yes. As night falls, the hunter shares a legend about the moon's cheese, a celestial wool that waxes and wanes because cosmic wolves keep nibbling it. You drift off wondering if this explains lactose intolerance. Dawn reveals a valley blanketed in wild onions, their scent mixing with the tang of drying arrowroot. The herders are giddy. This pasture makes milk especially flavorful. You're given 2 identical-looking curds to compare, one from here, one from the previous camp. The difference is staggering, like tasting terroir for the first time. A girl laughs as you struggle to articulate the flavors. It tastes like the land, she says, as if that explains everything. And maybe it does. Historians still argue whether Mongols could actually taste pasture differences or just enjoyed messing with visitors. The herd's oldest mare, a grizzled veteran with one blue eye, gets special treatment today. Her milk will become sudiyai tsai, butter tea, the ultimate comfort drink. You watch as a woman churns it using a method that defies physics, just a leather sack and rhythmic swings that look suspiciously like dance moves. When you ask how long it takes, she shrugs, until the spirits are satisfied. Modern food scientists would cry. The resulting butter is golden with a grassy aroma, nothing like the pale supermarket bricks you know. It's whisked into salted tea so vigorously that your biceps ache in sympathy. One sip and you understand why this was considered medicine. It coats your throat like liquid sunlight. Historians still argue whether Mongols added butter to tea or tea to butter. The ratio suggests the latter. A commotion erupts when someone discovers a cache of kormag, the prized, first milk, cheese made from a mare's postpartum secretion. It's doled out in thumbnail-sized portions, each wrapped in blue silk like crown jewels. The taste? Shockingly sweet, with a floral note that makes no sense until you learn the mares have been grazing on wild peonies. This sparks a debate about the great cheese heist of 1287. when a Ming diplomat allegedly smuggled out kormog in his hat lining. The Mongols retaliated by gifting his entire delegation lactose-heavy meals for a week, a biological warfare that scholars politely call digestive diplomacy. Meanwhile, you're instructed to let your portion dissolve slowly on your tongue. For strong bones, says the elder. And possibly hallucinations, given how intensely everyone watches for your reaction. Rain forces the camp indoors, transforming the gur into a steamy cheese laboratory. A teenage boy demonstrates how to make emergency aerol by stringing curds on horsehair and dangling them over the central fire. The heat creates twisted cheese sticks that look like edible mobiles, perfect for snacking while waiting out storms. The conversation turns to cheese-related proverbs. A family without cheese is like a sky without stars, more poignant in Mongolian. Trust the mare, but check the milk bucket, ancient equivalent of trust but verify. Even bad cheese can fill a stomach, the OG participation trophy. Historians still argue whether Genghis Khan actually said, "An army marches on its cheese stomach," but the sentiment tracks. The rain stops, revealing a rainbow that arcs over the pasture like a deal belt. Someone declares this perfect for making shar tos, a sun-infused butter believed to hold special healing properties. The process involves swirling fresh butter in a shallow bronze bowl while chanting, or possibly just gossiping, it's hard to tell. You're handed a spoonful with instructions to let it melt on your pulse points. Whether it's the placebo effect or some fatty acid magic, your chapped lips do feel better. Modern dermatologists would scream, but then again, they've never survived a -40°F winter on the steppe. Historians still argue whether this was early aromatherapy or just nomads being extra about their skincare. A visiting shaman performs a milk blessing, sprinkling airag toward the four directions with a juniper branch. The ceremony honors Ijin, the spirit of dairy, who apparently gets cranky if you don't share. You're given a tiny cheese figurine of a horse to place in your pocket, for smooth journeys, though it mostly just crumbles into your liner. The ritual includes tossing a spoonful of fresh milk into the fire, which hisses dramatically. Good sign, murmurs the herder next to you. Ijin likes drama. Scholars debate whether these practices were spiritual or early food safety tests. Happy spirits equals no stomach aches. That night, you dream of a giant mare who offers cheese from a silver pail. When you wake, there's actually a small curd by your bedding. Coincidence? Absolutely. But you eat it anyway. The herd reaches a sacred mountain where wild Argali sheep graze. Their milk is considered especially potent, but getting it involves cliffside acrobatics that make your palms sweat just watching. The resulting cheese, kar airag, or black milk, is aged in caves and tastes like a mossy forest floor in the best possible way. An elder recounts how Kublai Khan once demanded this cheese during a siege, delaying his army for 3 days while shepherds scrambled to retrieve hidden batches. Historians still argue whether this was strategic patience or just really good PR for dairy. You're allowed exactly one bite before the precious wheel is rewrapped in birch bark. It lingers on your tongue for hours, like a memory you can taste. A sandstorm rolls in from the Gobi, turning the world the color of stale airol. The herders respond by making bortsog, fried dough pockets stuffed with cheese that somehow don't leak when bitten. It's comfort food designed for apocalyptic weather, greasy enough to make your fingers glisten in the eerie orange light. As you chew, someone points out that Mongol armies carried these on campaigns, the original mare, if mares could survive being sat on by a horse for 6 months. Archaeologists have found petrified bortsog in saddlebags that still smelled faintly of sheep fat. Whether this speaks to preservation skills or questionable standards is up for debate. The storm rages outside, but inside the gur, it's all warm dough and drowsy contentment. The full moon inspires at Saga Ansar, white month, celebration, even though it's technically summer. Cheese takes center stage, literally, arranged on a felt altar alongside silver cups and blue scarves. You're taught the proper offering etiquette, right hand only, pinky curled, and never let your shadow fall across the dairy. A bard sings the Ballad of the Cheese Thief, a tragicomic tale about a man who stole from the wrong clan and was condemned to herd yaks until he produced a perfect biaslag. Spoiler, he died trying. The moral, delivered with a wink: good cheese takes patience. Crime doesn't pay, in quality dairy products. Historians still argue whether this was an actual judicial punishment or just a really persistent mom joke. At dawn, the women perform side divination, reading the future in the patterns of boiled milk skins. Your cup allegedly shows a journey with many cheese stops, which feels either thrilling or like a lactose intolerance nightmare. The real magic is how they keep straight faces while explaining that bubbly foam means good fortune, but too many bubbles means you poured too fast. You're given a lump of fresh curd to shape as you wish, an ancient personality test. Your lopsided attempt at a sheep gets polite nods, though the children's perfect miniature horses suggest you've failed spectacularly. No matter, your creation is tossed into the pot anyway. In Mongol culture, even bad art becomes soup. The summer heat wave triggers emergency cheese preservation. Curds are packed into clean sheep stomachs and submerged in the coldest river bend, tied to stakes so they don't float away like dairy ghosts. A girl explains that the best batches sing, when ready, a faint gurgle from fermentation gases. You press your ear to a bladder and swear you hear something, though it might just be wishful thinking. That night, the elder tells the legend of the singing cheese that led a lost caravan to safety. Historians still argue whether this refers to actual acoustic phenomena or just really persuasive salesmanship by medieval herders. Either way, you drift off imagining cheese serenades under the stars. A visiting Tibetan trader unveils his prized chirpy, a cheese so hard it requires 30 minutes of sucking to soften. For meditation focus, he explains, demonstrating how monks used it to stay awake during prayers. You give it an experimental nibble and immediately understand why enlightenment takes lifetimes. Your jaw muscles already feel spiritually evolved. The herders are fascinated by this foreign dairy and retaliate by presenting their own kormag, leading to an impromptu cheese summit. Historians still argue whether these exchanges inspired the yak butter sculptures of Lhasa, but the real lesson is clear. When cultures meet, they compare cheese first, ask questions later. The full milk moon rises, illuminating a nighttime cheese-making session. By firelight, women strain curds through horsehair sieves that look like spiderwebs, producing shar tioas, a butter so pure it's reserved for temple offerings. You're allowed to stir one batch and immediately ruin the rhythm, earning good-natured laughter. Even clumsy hands make edible butter, consoles an elder, though her smile suggests this might be a lie. The process is hypnotic. Pour, skim, pour again. Modern dairy farms would weep at the inefficiency, but here, time bends around the ritual. Historians still argue whether Mongol buttermaking counts as a dance form, but your sore shoulders vote yes. A sudden sheep stampede destroys half the morning's milk yield. Instead of anger, this prompts storytelling about the Great Cheese Famine of 1142, when a plague of locusts ate every scrap of dairy for miles. Grandmother survived by trading her silver hairpin for a single arrowel, says a herder, holding up a crumbly remnant like a holy relic. The lesson? Always hide emergency cheese in your boots. The mood lifts when someone discovers an intact skin of airag buried under a saddle. It's passed around with solemnity usually reserved for sacred texts. One sip and you grasp why nomads measured wealth in livestock rather than gold. No precious metal ever tasted this fortifying. The herd encounters a dairy shrine, an ovu cairn draped with cheesecloth and horsehair ribbons. Every passerby adds a crumb of cheese or splash of milk, whispering requests to the spirit of the land. You contribute a pinch of arrowel and are promptly instructed to circle the shrine 3 times clockwise. For luck, says the guide, though his smirk suggests this might be tourist hazing. Historians still argue whether these sites were spiritual pit stops or clever waste management. Either way, the local foxes seem devout. You spot one slinking away with a ribbon clutched in its jaws, possibly the world's cutest sacrilege. A heatwave inspires the creation of tsagani day popsicles, fresh cheese mixed with wild berries and frozen in leather pouches. The children treat them like currency, trading flavors with the seriousness of Wall Street brokers. You're given a rare blueberry one that stains your teeth purple for days, marking you as someone who got swindled by a 9-year-old. The elder explains that summer cheeses were deliberately made tart to combat thirst. A smart herder knows milk is first a medicine, she says, handing you another popsicle like it's a prescription. Modern nutritionists would balk at the sugar content, but then again, they've never outrun a sandstorm on dairy alone. A visiting Kazakh herder introduces curd, pebble-sized cheese balls dried with salt and pepper that explode on the tongue like savory fireworks. The Mongol children adore them, immediately inventing a game where they're used as ammunition, until an elder confiscates the stash with a weary, "We've been through this before." The cultural exchange turns competitive when the Kazakh boasts his people invented portable cheese. The Mongols retaliate with tales of Genghis Khan's legendary thunder curds, cheese allegedly so pungent it scared enemy horses. Historians still argue whether this was biological warfare or just really bad refrigeration, but the Kazakh leaves looking thoughtful. A lunar eclipse triggers emergency cheese rituals. All dairy work stops as women place silver needles in milk bowls to protect the purity. You're instructed to hold a lump of fresh curd toward the darkening moon, a practice the elder claims prevents souring, though the giggling teenager suggests this might be an elaborate prank. As shadows swallow the landscape, someone produces eclipse airag aged in a camel bladder. It tastes like fermented moonlight, if moonlight had notes of wild time and poor decisions. For vision, claims the shaman, though your subsequent dreams of flying yurts might disagree, the autumn equinox brings undawned ceremonies where every family presents their best cheese for blessing. The varieties dazzle. Zucchini, aged in birch bark. Kaimorian, smoked over juniper. Tsagan bulag, whitened with limestone ash. You're appointed honorary taster, a position that sounds prestigious until you realize it's basically human pH testing. The cheeses blur together in a lactic haze, though one ash-aged will leaves you coughing dramatically, much to the herder's delight. City lungs, they chuckle, passing you more airag as a cure. Migration day dawns with cheese-packed saddlebags and nostalgic goodbyes to grazing grounds. Children sneak extra airwool into their pockets like they're leaving candy stores, while elders bury small offerings of biaslag for the land spirits. You're given a travel ration sealed in a clean sheep's stomach, the medieval equivalent of vacuum packing. As the herd moves out, a herder points to last year's cheese cache hidden in a hollow tree. The surviving chunks are fossilized but still edible, proving Mongol preservation could outlast empires. Historians still argue whether this was food science or sheer stubbornness, but your crumbling sample tastes like victory either way. The first snowflakes arrive as you reach winter camp, prompting a Tsagani Day feast. Butter sculptures melt into tea, cheese soups steam in wooden bowls, and someone produces a ceremonial airag skin that's been fermenting since last spring. It's passed around with the gravity of a holy relic, each sip carrying the weight of seasons. You're granted the honor of stirring the communal pot, a wooden paddle taller than you, slick with decades of dairy fat. The rhythm matches your heartbeat now, this endless swirl of milk and tradition. Historians still argue whether Mongol culture revolved around horses or dairy, but as you drift off to the sound of churning, the answer seems obvious. Yes, winter settles in like an uninvited guest who won't leave. The herders respond by making budog, a whole goat stuffed with cheese and hot stones, then cooked inside its own skin. It's the original sous vide, if the vacuum seal was desperation and the timer was until the snow stops. You're handed a chunk of molten cheese that burns your fingertips but tastes like smoky heaven, the kind of meal that rewrites your definition of comfort food. Historians still argue whether this was ceremonial cuisine or just the ultimate lazy cook's hack, but the way everyone gathers around the steaming carcass suggests it was always about community. The children fish out half-melted curds with sticks, their laughter fogging the frozen air. A blizzard traps the camp for 3 days, during which you learn the fine art of cheese-based gambling. The games are simple. Guess how many airroll pieces fit in a closed fist. The prize is eating your incorrect guess. Balance cheese on your nose while reciting ancestors' names. The ominously named Black Stomach Challenge, involving aged Cormog. The elder wins every round with the serene confidence of someone who's cheated death, and possibly the rules, for decades. You lose spectacularly, your punishment being a shot of Shimeon Arki that tastes like fermented regret. Outside, the wind howls like a scorned spirit, but inside the gur, it's all greasy fingers and exaggerated victory dances. The thaw reveals a tragedy. A buried cheese cache has been raided by marmots. The little thieves left neat nibble marks on every airroll, creating accidental cheese art. Instead of anger, this inspires storytelling about the Marmot King, a mythical rodent who supposedly taught the first nomads which roots made milk curdle faster. Salvage operations begin. The least gnawed chunks are rinsed with airag, marmots are clean eaters, insists the optimist of the group, and repurposed into soup. Historians still argue whether Mongols truly believed in animal teachers or just enjoyed messing with anthropologists, but the repaired meal tastes surprisingly good, if you don't think about the tooth marks that a traveling blacksmith arrives to repair tools, paying for his services in cheese knives. Each blade is custom fit to its owner's grip, the elder's curves like a mare's neck, the children's tiny as butter spreaders. You're given one with a sheep bone handle, though your attempt at cheese carving produces something resembling a melted boot. The smith demonstrates proper technique by sculpting a perfect horse from frozen bioslag, then casually eating its head. Knives are alive, he says between chews. They remember every cut. This seems profound until you realize he's just preventing you from borrowing his tools. Still, you pocket the cheese shavings like a proper student of the blade. Spring's first milk is celebrated with Tsagaan Sar, the White Month Festival. The children wear cheese amulet necklaces for luck, while adults compete in dairy feats of strength. Butter churn sprinting, exactly what it sounds like. Curd tossing for distance. The dreaded mare milking while reciting poetry challenge. You're drafted as a judge for the cheese tasting contest, a position of power that immediately corrupts you. After the 7th sample, even tree bark starts seeming like a viable entry, earthy notes, bold mouthfeel. The actual winner is a grandmother whose Cormog makes several grown men weep, though whether from flavor or lactose overload remains unclear. Migration season returns, and with it, the great cheese inventory. Every family's dairy products are laid out on felt blankets for inspection, some wheels still bearing tooth marks from that marmot incident. The elder moves down the line like a gourmet general, sniffing, poking, and occasionally licking samples to determine what travels and what gets served tonight. The rejected cheeses become horhog, a stew where everything questionable simmers into submission under hot stones. It's the original, clean out the fridge meal, transformed by clever spicing and collective denial. Historians still argue whether this was culinary genius or food safety roulette, but your empty bowl suggests the former. On the trail, you discover the joy of saddle cheese, whatever random lump has been warming in your pocket all morning, softened by body heat into a primitive lunchable. The children treat this like a game, trading chunks based on mysterious criteria only they understand. My cloudy day airroll for your rainy trot bioslag. The elder catches you examining your cheese's strange new texture and laughs. Hunger is the best sauce, he says, though you suspect body temperature is the real secret ingredient. Still, there's something primal about eating food literally warmed by your journey, even if it occasionally sticks to your pocket lint. The herd reaches sacred hot springs, prompting a cheese spa day. Women steam bioslag over mineral vents, creating stretchy, sulfur-tinged delicacies said to cure joint pain. You're encouraged to try cheese bathing, rubbing melted curds on your skin like some bizarre dairy facial. It leaves you smelling like a fancy omelet but suspiciously soft. Historians still argue whether these practices had real benefits or just gave bored nomads something to do while waiting for clothes to dry. The local marmots certainly approve. They creep closer with each discarded rind, their tiny paws outstretched like furry little sanitation workers. A surprise sandstorm forces the group to take shelter in ancient ruins, the crumbled walls of a long-abandoned dairy outpost. The elder points out grooves where cheese molds once sat and a suspiciously shiny patch where generations of knives sharpened against stone. Ghost herds still pass here, murmurs a herder, and for a moment, you swear you hear distant bells. Someone digs up a petrified airroll from the rubble. The elder pronounces it, probably still good, a phrase that haunts you, before pocketing it as a souvenir. That night, stories flow like airag about cities built on cheese taxes and great khans who married for dairy dowries. The wind howls through broken arches, but the fire burns bright, and the cheese, fresh this time, tastes like continuity. The final campfire of the season glows under a sky so star-crowded it looks like spilled airroll. The herders pass around a ceremonial cheese woven with horsehair, each strand representing a generation that worked these pastures. You're instructed to add one of your own hairs, a ritual that feels oddly intimate for someone who still can't milk a mare without getting kicked. As the cheese melts into the fire, an offering or midnight snack, the line is blurry. The elder recounts how his people measure time not in years but in cheese seasons, the spring of sweet curds, the summer of thunder airag, the winter of blackened cormog. Historians still argue whether this was poetry or precise calendar keeping, but right now, with your belly full and the embers fading, it feels like both. The last embers of the fire glow like dying stars as the camp settles into final stillness. Wrapped in your sheepskin blanket, you watch moonlight silver the cheese knives laid out for tomorrow's journey, each blade resting where its owner will find it at dawn. The herd sleeps, their slow breaths frosting the air, and even the ever-restless marmots have tucked themselves away with stolen airroll crumbs. For all the grandeur of empires and conquests, this is what endures, the quiet rituals of milk and patience. The way a grandmother's hands know precisely when curds will hold their shape. The children's secret cheese-trading alliances. The unspoken rule that no one travels without something fermented to share. Historians will keep arguing about dates and influences, but here in the pre-dawn hush, the truth is simple. Some cultures built monuments, while others built breakfasts capable of crossing continents in a saddlebag. And if you listen closely, past the wind, beneath the horses' sleepy snorts, you can almost hear the echo of 1,000 morning milk pails ringing like temple bells across the steppe. The plains stretch silent now, a sea of grass rolling under the weight of stars. Your fingers still carry the scent of smoked curds and mare's milk, your muscles the memory of endless churning. But the herd has stopped moving, the cheese knives are sheathed, and even the ever-present airag skins hang slack and empty. Breathe deep, that's frost and wild thyme, the perfume of a land that fed empires on little more than ingenuity and lactic acid. The same constellations that guided cheese-laden caravans still will overhead, unchanged by centuries. Somewhere out there, a marmot naps on stolen bioslag, a foal nurses its first milk, and a herder's child sneaks an extra handful of airroll into tomorrow's saddlebag. Let your thoughts drift like those stray curds floating in tonight's farewell suti tsai. The Mongols may have conquered the world on horseback, but they sustained it on dairy, one jostled, improvised, gloriously unrefined batch at a time. And as sleep finally pulls you under, know this, somewhere beyond the horizon, another moon is rising over another pasture, where another generation is learning that cheese isn't just food, it's memory made edible, history you can hold in your hands. The wind sighs through the grass one last time, a lullaby older than Genghis, older than the first tamed mare. You are warm. You are full. The earth turns, patient as aging cormog, and the night keeps its ancient promises.
Thank you so much for listening to tonight's story. If you enjoyed this gentle journey through the past, we'd love it if you gave the video a like and subscribe to the Dozing Historian. It helps us keep making cozy, sleepy history content, and you'll be the first to know when a new episode drifts in. Sleep well, and we'll see you next time.